And we have an item on the agenda, and that is a hearing on House Bill 2525. So we will open up the hearing on House Bill 2525, and we will begin with an overview of the legislation from our Reviser of Statutes, Reviser Lawrence. We look forward to your words of wisdom.
A lot of confidence today, sir, but I appreciate that. Thank you. House Bill 2525 would establish fees for the regulation of certain underground injection control wells and would also direct certain fees to the Water Program Management Fund. So first, for the underground injection control wells, Section 1 of the bill, in subsection I on page 3, starting in line 9, would require the Secretary of Health and Environment to adopt rules and regulations to establish fees for permitting, monitoring, testing, inspecting, and regulating underground injection control class 1 wells that could not exceed certain amounts, and you can see those amounts listed on page 3 of the bill. Additionally, the Secretary would be required to reduce fees for facilities already subject to fees for underground hydrocarbon storage or salt solution mining. Similarly, the bill in subsection J, which is also on page 3, starting in line 18, would require the Secretary to adopt rules and regulations to establish fees for underground injection control class 5 wells that could not exceed $2,000 per well, but no fee could be established for small capacity sanitary septic systems. Monies collected from these fees would be credited to the Subsurface Hydrocarbon Storage Fund, which is used to cover the cost of regulating underground injection control wells. So now switching gears a little bit to the part of the bill that deals with the Water Program Management Fund. Currently, certain application, certification, and license fees collected from water well contractors, the certification of operators of water supply systems and wastewater treatment facilities are credited to the State General Fund. Instead of the State General Fund, sections 2 through 4 of the bill would credit such fees to the Water Program Management Fund. House Bill 2525 passed the House as amended by the House Committee on a vote of 87 to 24 and would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of our reviser. Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know the vote that passed out of the House, the vote was on this?
I do. It was 87 to 24.
Thank you.
You mentioned on multiple times, and I see it in the legislation where it says the Secretary shall adopt rules and regulations. Does the Secretary not currently have the authority to adopt these rules and regulations, or are we just sort of establishing parameters for the Secretary?
So the Secretary has authority to adopt rules and regulations for certain things in this program, but this would give the Secretary the authority to adopt rules and regulations to establish these particular fees for these certain type of wells.
Okay, that's what I thought you would answer, but I wanted to ask. And then you mentioned in section, I believe, 2 through 4, the Water Program Management Fund. And it says, I just noticed at the very bottom because it jumped out at me on the page 5, the Water Program Fund established. Has it already been established, or this establishes a new fund? I think it's probably already established because on the bottom of page 5 it says pursuant to KSA 65-166B.
You are correct, and you can actually see at the bottom of page 3 that section that we're amending, and you can see the old language there that says there is hereby created in the State Treasury the Water Program Management Fund. That is old language.
All right.
So yes, you are correct. That fund already existed.
I'm correct a lot. You can have it. Maybe not. All right. Further questions of the reviser? All right. Thank you. Our first conferee is a proponent, and that would be Mr. Michael Gillespie, Director of Government Affairs. And
You go first. They kind of cover the whole bill. I'll talk about the specifics for injection.
so you were asking for whom to go first? Okay. We will adjust our chairman's agenda accordingly, and we will allow the, well, we had, Mr. Gillespie, that the KDHE was written only. Is that not correct? Okay. So we will then turn to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and who will be the conferee? Okay, and I don't have the name, so if you could step up, identify yourself for the record, please, and then testify.
Chairman Peck, thank you. I'm Tom Stiles. I'm Director of the Bureau of Water for KDHE. These programs fall under the Bureau, and we stand in support of House Bill 2525. As the reviser has described, the bill authorizes the Secretary to adopt fees imposed on a certain couple classes of underground injection control wells, Class 1 and Class 5, that heretofore have not been charged any fees. And in response to your question to the reviser's office, Mr. Chair, the Secretary doesn't have authority yet to impose those fees. This would be the statutory underpinning for her to adopt those rules and regs, but it also lays out sideboards in terms of how far she can extend or apply those fees. That is a result of our conversation with industry over the past 4 years over a fee structure such as this. One of the biggest benefits of this legislation it will provide equitable relief to the facilities that are engaged in the underground hydrocarbon storage, of which Mr. Gillespie is representing. There are 4 companies with 10 facilities that are currently paying in fees into our underground hydrocarbon storage fee fund. Those fees essentially subsidize the administration of all our geologic programs, both the underground hydrocarbon storage as well as the underground injection control. The other exception is for Class 3, and those are our salt solution mining companies such as Cargill or Morton. They have a statutory fee that's in place there. And some of those also have Class 1 injection wells, as do the underground hydrocarbon storage facilities. This legislation not only provides a cap on the fees that we would impose on the Class 1 and Class 5 wells, but it also then authorizes the Secretary to provide fee relief to those facilities that have already been paying into the programs. And as such, it will expand the number of facilities that will provide revenue support for the programs, thereby providing a little relief from those 4 companies of underground hydrocarbon storage and the 3 companies of salt solution mining that up to this point in time have provided the sole source of revenue coming from the facilities to administer a variety of these geologic programs. So the bill establishes that and lays out those parameters. It also then allows for a redirection of fees from the certified operators that operate our water and wastewater facilities. The fees that they're charged for their certification up to this point in time go to the State General Fund. Those would be rerouted back to our water management fund, which is already in existence, and it typically receives the fees that are charged to our pollutant control wastewater and stormwater permits and underpin the financial support for that program. And then also for water well drillers, those certification and drill fees would, in Section 4, be redirected from the State General Fund into the water management fee fund within KDHE as well. So there'll be a redirection of the fees from the State General Fund over into program-specific funds within KDHE. So that essentially is the essence of it, but it represents a directing the fees that are charged to certain activities to go toward those programs that are actually administering the programs that those activities operate under. And it also then provides that redistribution of revenue support to provide a more equitable base from the facilities that utilize our geologic resources for their economic type of activity. There's also some language in there that gets rid of some old archaic language that no longer is pertinent, so it's a bit of a cleanup in there as well. But taken in sum total then, that formulates the foundation of support that the agency has for House Bill 2525. And I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Committee questions, Secretary? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Can you tell me the difference between a hazardous waste injection and a non-hazardous waste injection? Can you give me some
Yes, sir. The chemical composition of what the wastes are that typically most injection fluids are brines associated with either the formation of salt caverns or then the movement of hydrochemical products in and out of those resulting caverns. And sometimes those brines have to be injected. That constitutes the majority of our Class 1 well universe. But there are some times where industrial processes are generating chemical wastes that have no ability to be reutilized up on the surface, and they are disposed of in the most safe manner, and that's a hazardous, Class 1 hazardous waste well that goes down into the deep geologic formations underlying the state. We have one facility that is a hazardous Class 1 operation. That would be Oxy down by Wichita.
So are you the one that decides whether that's hazardous or non-hazardous?
There are federal parameters associated with the underground injection control program that define what constitutes a hazardous waste or what is deemed as non-hazardous.
Also, inactive status. How long is an inactive status? I mean, is it something that hasn't been active for a year? Is there a time process to that?
It's sort of in standby status. It isn't fully plugged so that it'll never be used again. It is basically put on a hiatus until such time that economic factors and the facility operations dictate they need to reopen and restart that operation of that well. So that will span multiple years.
One final question, Mr. Chairman. On the inactive status in the $1,000, is that a one-time fee, or do you know if they're charging $1,000 and then it just goes forever, or is that how it goes?
It'll be an annual, and these are all annual fees.
Annual fees. Okay, thank you.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stiles. My question is, how many injection wells do we currently have that are collecting fees, and what's the total revenue of those fees? And then I'll ask another question. Thanks.
Currently, within the fees that we collect among the wells, the 4 companies that have underground hydrocarbon storage, which utilize a well to basically put hydrocarbon products that ultimately go back out into the energy market that are stored in our salt caverns, are placed in those salt caverns, and then when they are utilized to be put back into the marketplace, then brine is injected to displace it and bring the hydrocarbon products back out. There are 4 companies and 10 facilities, and then a number of, I don't know exactly how many wells they are, but the current fee structure attached to those 4 underground hydrocarbon storage facilities generates $385,000 a year. There are then, of the 4, Class 3 salt solution mining. Again, this is the Mortons, the Cargills. They all have about anywhere from 1 to 2 wells there that are associated strictly with the process of pulling out brine for ultimately then processing it to create and utilize salt on the marketplace. Those 4 companies generate about $78,000, $79,000 a year. What is laying outside and what would be subject to this legislation are about 50-plus injection wells for Class 1 and about 10 to 12 activities under Class 5 that would be subject to the fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. So how much more revenue will these additional fees create? And what are the current balances in those other fee funds currently, the funds that we're eliminating and creating the new water program management fund?
If we ran up to the caps that are defined by the statute, we think with the current universe of Class 1 and Class 5s, we'd generate around $200,000 a year, plus or minus 10,000 or so. The other two funds, the underground hydrocarbon storage fund and the salt solution mining fund, typically carry over balances of $20,000 to $30,000 at the rate turnover of each fiscal year. Then it's just a matter of managing the cash flow of when we receive the fees, which are typically in the spring, and making sure we have funds available there to basically carry on utilize those funds for our operations there.
So let me get this straight. So this will create about an additional 200,000 in revenue? Is that what you're saying? Okay, across those approximately 50, you said 50 Class 1 injection wells and then an additional 10 to 12 Class 5, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see in the legislation well, I have to find what section, anyway, on page 2, it talks about that there, in no case shall fees be established for small capacity sanitary septic systems in the House amended to add, including single-family residential. As it relates to guidelines or restrictions for septic systems and wastewater ponds, is that something that's statewide or left up to each county to determine?
It depends on the size. Typically, a typical individual household septic system is just subject to county sanitary code requirements. We don't typically deal with something so small there. When it's involving a larger facility that potentially puts out a proportion of more a volume of wastewater in there, that we potentially would authorize that under Class 5. The House committee action was to make sure that we didn't impose a fee on facilities like schools that potentially would utilize a septic system and do that, even if they fell under the universe of Class 5. So it's never been the intention of us looking at individuals or domestic or small commercial operations as a revenue source for this type of operation.
Okay, thank you. Committee, additional questions of Mr. Stiles? Secretary Fact, or I don't know why I keep calling you Secretary, Senator. I guess
Thank you,
I'm
Mr. Chairman.
trying to get rid of you or something.
I know.
Senator Fagg.
This is kind of a follow-up to Senator Straub's question. If we're going to have about 200,000 a year and we were at 79, why do we need the extra 120,000?
The demands on the programs are escalating. We're required by the federal government to do more electronic reporting, and so some of these funds are going to be utilized to provide financial support for the Kansas Geological Survey to maintain our electronic monitoring and record-keeping process. Some of the program right now is supported by federal grant money. These fees basically provide a safety net depending on how the federal funds ebb and flow relative to that. We are fully staffed now at 8 individuals, geologists, and we do incur times where we start getting a little cash strapped relative to that. But the demands that are being placed on these well systems, and the fact that to this point in time, for the past 20 years or so, a small proportion of facilities that happen to have underground hydrocarbon storage, salt caverns, but also have Class 1 wells have been the workhorse to finance a majority of the program there. This provides some equity, but it also then allows for us to have a robust regulatory program in place for the program, those facilities and economic activities to continue to function within compliance of federal and state law.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Had some real good questions on here, and I was just trying to get this on my mind as far as who all will be paying this extra, these extra fees. You mentioned there'd be 4 companies, but who else, what other groups could possibly?
The majority of the injection wells are in fact private sector companies, but there are certain cities. City of Hutchinson disposes of its water treatment plant waste down to Class 1 injection wells and represent probably the largest volume of injection that goes on in Reno County. The City of Lakin disposes of its water treatment waste. City of Wichita and their aquifer storage and recharge project over the Equus beds, pulling water from the Little Ark River and then injecting it into the Equus beds, is subject to a Class 5 type of permit. That probably is the smaller niche of non-industrial or non-company or non-private sector facilities that would be involved in this.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I understand we're setting a maximum for the fee. And so when you talked about federal grants, you wouldn't charge these rates if they weren't needed to operate the program.
No, not necessarily. I mean, and what the commitment we did make, and I think the fiscal note that we prepared is actually in error because it indicates some revenue coming from these fees in FY25. But the commitment we made to the industry is that we would give them time to school up for preparation for the fees. So at earliest, it would be FY26. And then we'll still have to do regulations to set these fees there. And that'll certainly be something that'll be an ongoing dialogue between us and the industry to set what is the appropriate level of fees to come out of with the initial regulations associated with that. So no, we wouldn't necessarily run right to the caps as needed there. The one thing we do want to do though is make sure that we provide some of that relief to those 4 companies and their 10 facilities that have been the workhorse for our geologic programs and supporting them.
I heard you indicate fluctuation in the federal funding. Do you then fluctuate or raise and lower the fees during a year because the federal money comes in higher or lower than it did the previous year?
To date, we have not. We have the fees that are generally set that are associated with the UHS or the underground hydrocarbon storage or the salt solution mining have been fairly fixed and have not and are running at the caps that are defined in statute or in regulation. So they have not been fluctuated as the federal grants have ebb and flowed in terms of what we would do. But again, in response to Senator Francisco, one reason we would probably start out a little lower than what the caps would indicate so that we would gain experience on just what it would necessarily take to be able to continue to maintain seamless operation of the regulatory programs.
I have written down several different dollar figures. $385,000 you mentioned at one point. And
yes, sir.
You talked about the fee at a cap would be $200,000. So what I'm going to ask is if you could, or KDHE could provide the committee with a brief history, 3 to 5 years, of what federal money has come in, what money has come in from the fees, fee fund balance at the close of a fiscal year, just information to help us sort of see a trend or a track. And then you also indicated that the fiscal note that KDHE provided to the Division of Budget should have been 0 for 25. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. We would not see a dime from this legislation until at earliest FY '26.
Okay. And so I was making a note accordingly, but if you, like I said, if the department could provide us that information, that would be appreciated. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you mentioned that so part of this is due to increased demands from the feds. Could you elaborate on what those demands might entail?
It's both with federal expectation and, for example, if the federal initiative to do carbon sequestration, and the feds have been pushing very hard on, let's sequester carbon dioxide down in the geologic formations. Now, in this state, in Kansas, that falls under the purview of the Kansas Corporation Commission. But to facilitate some of that, KCC and KDHE are going to have to do some joint operations in managing the associated permits there, that it's not all associated with just under KCC authority there. The marketplace itself is looking at more and more demands of what is going to be placed down there. And then we have the ongoing uncertainty of just what is the carrying capacity of our receiving geologic formations, the Arbuckle, which has been a subject of concern in the past 4 years with the seismic activity in Reno County and in Wichita. That's been associated with injection down into the Arbuckle, and has created seismic instability that then resonates with tremors being felt up on the surface there. Ongoing investigations and management decisions in terms of how we inject fluids in terms of timing, volume, and spreading out and looking toward more waste reduction. For example, we are working hard with Hutchinson to get them out of the Class 1 business again, as the largest injector within Reno County, trying to get them to reduce the amount of volume they put down their 2 injection wells and look at alternative means of disposing of their water treatment waste, et cetera, because Reno County has always been a hotbed of, again, the seismic activity. But underlying it also is just what is the ability of the formation to take on more and more of these wastes, because everyone seems to want to go to this Arbuckle formation to dispose of these wastes. We're not sure at what point we are going to start seeing the Arbuckle rear up and say, and manifest itself with, can't take any more of these wastes there. So there are some technical expectations that we need to evaluate. There's ongoing federal initiatives, and then the marketplace itself is looking for a variety of things that it wants to, for example, again, the emerging contaminant of PFAS. There's been many initiatives to say, let's take PFAS, forever chemical, figure out how to dispose of it. Oh, let's send it down a Class 1 well and send it down to basically extinction down into the underlying geologic formations. So we have a variety of uses that are being entertained with the Class 1. That all puts on additional stress on our program as to how do we contemplate being able to appropriately regulate and manage these new initiatives.
Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned a partial plug well. I understand plug wells, unplug wells. What's a partial?
Well, it's actually not plugged. It's just basically stood down. It just doesn't receive any injection fluids there. It's available, but it's capped for the time being until such time that the company decides we're going to reactivate it and start sending fluids back down.
So at certain time you plan to have it reactivated, or it might be?
It might be. It's not our decision. Okay. The company makes the decision we need to do it. We then go through the process to reactivate that permit associated it so that it conforms with all the requirements of state and federal law.
All right. Seeing no further questions, Mr. Stiles, appreciate your testimony, and we'll look forward if you could provide that to our staff, or our staff may have it, but if you would at least communicate with research and so they can pass information on regarding the fee fund balances, transfers, federal money, et cetera.
Okay, we certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
All right, now we will move on to the conferee, Mr. Gillespie. But before Mr. Gillespie testifies, Senator Francisco, page pictures, were they changed on the time? I do have a page today.
The page office told my office assistant they were 8:55. They're at 9:15.
At 9:15.
9:15.
So I just thought that I would mention that the chair does have page pictures. So if the chair leaves, Mr. Gillespie, it's not because you said something to upset the chair. And even if you did say something to upset the chair would not be the one leaving.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate you being flexible, allowing Mr. Stiles to talk first. He was able to take all the questions, so it leaves me to just speak on the key portions that affect One Oak. So my name is Michael Gillespie. I work for One Oak as Director of Government Relations in Kansas. And we have been working on this bill for 4 years, and the reason it's been 4 years, because we had it passed through the Senate Ag Committee, it was sitting on the Senate floor, and COVID happened, and for whatever reason, this didn't make the cut of things that need to be done before the legislature closed. So here we are again, and I think we're hopefully going to be moving this bill forward to finally get some things done that One Oak and the companies that he mentioned, the 4 companies that are operating, that are paying and subsidizing the fee for wastewater injection have been for the last decade. So I'll give you a little background of who One Oak is, so you understand why we care about this bill, what we do, and then dive into why we care about this bill, why we support it, and why industry would be in favor of new fees. So One Oak is a natural gas liquids company. We recently purchased Magellan Pipeline, so we're now in refined products, so crude gas, diesel, jet also. But the part of the business that operates for wastewater injection is our natural gas liquids business. So One Oak operates in 20 states. If you look at the map that's attached to my testimony, you'll see kind of the breadth of our footprint, but then also the breadth of our footprint in Kansas. One Oak operates underground salt cavern storage. We have about 350 wells of salt cavern storage across our footprint, and that is where we store our propane, butane, ethane, propane mix, natural gasoline. They're in salt formations, so salt formations are a very good place to put this product because if you have water pressure coming in, that salt really keeps it from nothing escaping, so that's really good. And we have regulation that makes sure we don't let it escape. But also, it would not be very economic sense to let any product escape, trying to make it to the market. And so we have the salt cavern storage, and to get our propane into the cavern, we push it in, and then if we wanted to get it out, we have to displace it. So we put salt, water, or brine into that formation to push that product out. There are occasions where we have too much brine, and the capability of not having a place to put that, and that brine is then injected in our Class 1 underground injection well. These wells are currently Class 1, already has regulation for permitting, monitoring, testing, so this would not be adding any new regulation as far as how the program operates. This is specifically for fees to help continue to operate the program by all of the other companies who are currently not paying into the underground injection control program or the subsurface underground hydrocarbon storage fee fund. So wastewater injection in Kansas started because of the salt cavern storage displacing that product out of the ground and having that extra brine. And so the 4 companies were paying. One Oak pays roughly about $200,000 a year to the subsurface underground hydrocarbon storage fee fund. And that helps pay for underground injection control program. Well, if we've been doing this for the last decade, you can imagine with other companies now that aren't associated with underground salt storage using the program and not having those fees, we would like to see that us not having to subsidize their programs anymore. And while Mr. Stiles talked about the 4 companies being the workhorse for funding their organization along with some federal dollars, we love being the workhorse, but we would love to help spread that around so that every company is paying an equitable amount of money for their fees for the regulation of our underground injection control program. 3 years ago, I believe, or 4 years ago, we appreciate Senator Francisco in putting in this bill, the former iteration, caps on these fees. We do not want and we appreciate KDH&E, but we do not want any agency to have fees that can continue to go up and up without having caps on there. So we really appreciate Senator Francisco working on caps for those fees. And so we feel that this is an equitable amount to make sure that the program is taken care of, that we continue to have a good program, partnership with the state. And if you look at page 3, lines 16 and 17, it states, and as Tom mentioned, relief for the companies been paying, the secretary should provide reduction of fees for those currently paying in. That is a big portion for us because, I mean, and maybe a breath of fresh air, how many times in legislation does it say the state's going to give people back some money for paying in for so long? I think that we really like that idea also. We have been working on this bill for 4 years. We tailored it, and finally, after COVID, we think we have a good bill, and we'd like to move it forward. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Mr. Stiles touched on about everything else, but One Oak is fully in support of this legislation as an operator of underground injection control program, and someone who's been paying fees for a long time. I stand for any questions.
You indicated, Mr. Gillespie, that you just pointed out that they're close to the end, page 3, the reduction of fees for facilities already subject to the fees besides One Oak. Are there some others?
There are, yeah. So Williams Company, I believe Enterprise, and I don't know the other company, but those are the companies that we work regularly with and next to near our facilities in either Bushton, Kansas, Conway, Kansas, or Hutchinson, where we have our underground salt cavern storage and our injection wells.
All right. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who owns the easements to the pipeline that goes to the Front Range?
Well, so we purchased Magellan Pipeline, and so we own a pipeline that goes from Scott City to Denver that cuts through between Sharon Springs and Weston. So One Oak now owns that line. But there are also multiple pipelines, crude lines, natural gas liquids lines that come from the northwest corner of Kansas down into either Bushton or go ahead to Cushing.
Into Colorado.
Yeah, and so we aren't the only one who operates pipelines in that corridor.
And we hear back there, Hugoton, is a gas field of the world.
Sure.
There's rumors that it's running low.
I'm not sure that's a rumor anymore.
I know. That's where I was going.
The natural gas in that field, the Hugoton field, one of the most prominent natural gas fields in the world, has continued to see depletion. There hasn't been a whole lot of new drilling in Hugoton. As you look at the formation, we're just getting low volumes of gas coming out of there. We're not doing any drilling, but the companies that are not providing a lot of gas that would be coming onto our system. If you look in the southwest Kansas corridor, we do have all those blue squiggly lines, and that's our natural gas gathering system. So we're literally attaching to the gas well, bringing that off. But as time has progressed, we've had to continue to add more compression, more or less power to push it, because there's not that natural pressure from those wells, because there's just not as much gas coming out of that formation.
So sir? Mr. Chairman, could I go one more? That'll wait to take over. Where's the natural gas? Where do we have an abundance of it? Is it? I see Oklahoma. Is that where it's?
Oklahoma, West Texas was a big portion, and there are a lot of pipelines that come from western Oklahoma or western Texas that come up into our system that eventually makes its way to Chicago, and they're points off of other companies' pipelines that then feed all of the cities and towns in the state.
Additional questions for Mr. Gillespie? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I notice in your written testimony, it says One Oak pays roughly $200,000 annually to KDH&E, and I had written down $79,000 per year. I thought was kind of collected for all four.
I believe that's a different program. I believe that's for the Class 5s, not for the but But that, for it's the subsurface underground hydrocarbon storage fee fund, we pay, and that's just One Oak, not the other companies, we pay about $200,000 a year. There's a per underground storage fee per cavern, and then a facility fee that totals that number. And I'd be happy to bring them up to answer whatever that total fee is they make from SUHS.
We trust Mr. Gillespie that will be part of the information they provide to the committee, so we can get our minds around exactly
Sure.
who pays what fees in various
Sure.
classes and so forth. Additional questions, Mr. Gillespie? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. And
Thank you very much.
providing your testimony. We do have written-only neutral testimony from the League of Kansas Municipalities, so I will direct the committee's attention to that neutral testimony. And committee, it's been a little bit challenging for the chair to follow some of this, so I would, if you have questions of any of the conferees before I close the hearing that you want to circle back around, we can, but if you're good. All right, it looks like the committee is good, so we shall close the hearing on House Bill 2525. I have nothing further for the committee, so we